Part 1 Opening. Imagine this. You are a top-tier chef aiming for 3 Michelin stars. You have created a unique flavor that never existed before, and customers wait months just to book a table to taste your dish. But one day, a competitor accuses you of being a fraud. Their reasoning: you use the same knives, frying pans, and kitchen layout as the restaurant next door. They claim that since you didn't build the kitchen yourself, your cooking skills are fake. Does that sound absurd? Yet this is the essence of a heated controversy that recently unfolded at the forefront of the South Korean artificial intelligence industry. It is the plagiarism allegation surrounding the solar model developed by Upstage, a national representative AI startup. The core of the suspicion was simple. Critics argued that the structural blueprint, the skeleton of the model, was too similar to Meta's Llama or Chinese models. In response, Upstage released their training logs, the record of the model's growth, and rebutted, "We only borrowed the kitchen. The taste created within it, the intelligence, was cultivated by us from a blank slate." In the world of finance, we call this the asset-light paradox. It raises a fundamental question: can you prove value solely through the core, content without owning the shell, physical infrastructure? And there is a deal that placed a staggering 13 trillion won, $10 billion, bet on this dangerous question. It is the acquisition of the LA Lakers by the Mark Walter Consortium. In this session, we will deconstruct the Upstage AI controversy and the Lakers deal to uncover the structural secret of modern business, why hardware ownership is becoming meaningless, and why software density is becoming the only capital that matters. Part 2, Insight Extraction, LA Lakers and Upstage AI Tenant Strategy. Let's peel back the surface of this deal and the controversy to analyze the governing logic hidden beneath. The Mark Walter Consortium valued the LA Lakers at $5.5 billion, historically the highest valuation in NBA history. However, if you look inside the details of these flashy numbers, you find a strange contradiction. The Lakers, a club worth billions, do not own a single square inch of their home stadium, the Crypto.com arena. They are tenants who must pay rent and live as guests until 2041, under the ownership of the AEG Group. Compare this to the Golden State Warriors, who own the Chase Center on prime real estate in San Francisco. In other words, Mark Walter bought a company without a building at nearly the same valuation as a company with a building. He paid the price of an asset-heavy company for an asset-light company. Why on earth did he make this decision? The first governing logic piercing through this deal is the infrastructure tenant strategy. Mark Walter has finished his calculations. In the sports business, money is no longer made from the real estate known as the stadium. The revenue generated from ticket sales or hot dogs at the stadium is just a fraction of the total profit. The real cash flow comes from the broadcast rights deal concluded by the NBA, worth $76 billion, roughly 100 trillion Korean won. This massive amount of money is not distributed to teams that own stadiums, but to the teams that global viewers want to watch. To Mark Walter, the stadium is merely a tool borrowed temporarily to play basketball, a utility. The real asset he bought for billions was not the hardware called the stadium, but the authority to access the pipeline where $76 billion flows, and the brand power of the Lakers that allows them to occupy the largest share of that pipeline. He boldly gave up ownership of the shell and went all in on the value of the core. This is structurally identical to the Upstage incident. Upstage stated that they followed market standards for compatibility and that insisting on a proprietary architecture would be inefficient. The standard specifications mentioned here are exactly like the Lakers stadium. When developing an AI model, the architecture is like erecting the steel frame of a building. In the past, building the steel frame yourself was a symbol of technological prowess. But the situation is different now. The world's semiconductors and software tools are already optimized for global standard architectures like Llama or GLM. If you insist on a proprietary architecture just to satisfy technological pride, you become an isolated island cut off from the global AI ecosystem. Upstage avoided this trap. Just as the Lakers rent their arena, Upstage rented the architecture. They adopted the strategy of riding on top of a proven framework built by others. This is not an absence of technology, but an efficient allocation of capital. Then a second question arises. If the frame belongs to someone else, where does the real value of this company lie? Here enters the second governing logic, the value shift to weights. The decisive evidence Upstage presented to prove their innocence was the loss graph, their learning log. This is a growth diary recording the process of the model starting from a blank slate, knowing nothing and learning to find the right answers through vast amounts of data. This graph cannot be forged. It is a unique curve that can never be produced by simply copying someone else's model. The meaning is clear. Even if the building's frame was borrowed, the interior filling that building, the neural network of the brain that processes data and makes judgments, known as the weights, belongs 100% to Upstage. The Lakers deal is the same. The object Mark Walter paid billions for was not the pile of cement called the stadium. He bought the 17 championship trophies, the legacy left by Kobe Bryant, and the overwhelming content power generated by the superstar LeBron James. The stadium can be changed and the lease can be renewed. But the Lakers' brand and fandom, the weights of the content, are irreplaceable. Ultimately, the battle in modern business has shifted. It is no longer about becoming the structural architect who designs the board, but about how densely you can fill the content on a board that is already set. Those who do not understand this continue to focus on the shell. They criticize domestic AI for not having a domestic skeleton, or they blame a team owner for not having a stadium. But they miss the point. Originality lies not in the structure, but in the density of the data and stories flowing within that structure. Part 3, Structural Mapping. Macro industry, game engines, and fabless. Now let's expand our field of view. The structural isomorphism shown by the Lakers and Upstage is not limited to finance and AI. This is a massive current flowing through the entire macroeconomy. Let's look for the most distinct examples in the gaming and semiconductor industries. First, look at the gaming industry. 20 years ago, if you wanted to develop a so-called blockbuster game, the first thing you had to do was build your own game engine. Just as Pearl Abyss developed a proprietary engine when creating Black Desert, this was a matter of technological pride and a symbol of independence. But how about now? More than half of the games worldwide are created using Epic Games' Unreal Engine or the Unity engine. What does this mean? It means game companies have chosen to stop being architects and instead become interior designers. The architecture known as the game engine has become a shared commodity. Users no longer ask which engine was used to make a game. Their only interest lies in how captivating the storytelling is or how precise the hit impact feels. In other words, victory is determined not by the shell, the engine, architecture, but by the density of the content running on top of it, the weights. However, as mentioned earlier, this tenant strategy comes with a fatal price: ecosystem dependence. Do you remember the panic that swept through indie game developers worldwide last year when Unity announced a pricing policy change to charge fees per download? This is exactly the same situation as the Lakers facing new salary cap regulations from the NBA. When the landlord notifies a rent hike, the survival of the tenants is threatened. This applies to the semiconductor industry as well. Look at the companies with the highest market capitalization globally over the last 5 years. What do Apple and NVIDIA have in common? They have no factories. They are fabless, design-specialized companies with no manufacturing facilities. They do not own the massive architecture known as the fab, fabrication plant, to produce chips. That fab is owned by a foundry company called TSMC in Taiwan. NVIDIA borrows someone else's kitchen, TSMC. Yet the market assigns a much higher value to the factory-less NVIDIA than to the factory-owning TSMC. Why? Because factories can be built if you have money, but the AI accelerator design blueprints held by NVIDIA, their unique data weights, are proprietary intellectual property that money cannot buy. Ultimately, the map of the macro industry is clearly bifurcating: the infrastructure owners who lay the board and the super tenants who provide overwhelming content upon that board. In the past, the one who owned the infrastructure was king, but now the super tenant who possesses irreplaceable content on top of that infrastructure holds greater power than the king. Just as the Lakers wield more brand power than the stadium owner, and NVIDIA has become a more valuable company than the factory owner. Part 4, Structural Mapping. Micro Application, Franchise, and Career. Now let's narrow this massive discourse down to the micro realm our daily lives and tangible realities. The logic of asset-light and content weights applies directly to the restaurants you visit every day, or even your own career strategy. Let's deconstruct the strategy of CEO Baek Jong-won, the godfather of the restaurant industry. Looking at the Born Korea's expansion method, they do not prefer the heavy approach of buying buildings to move in. Instead, they lease prime locations. And what do they fill that borrowed space with? They fill it with the brand called Baek Jong-won, recipes verified by data, and an efficient kitchen system. Here the building is the architecture. The recipes and systems are the weights. Customers don't come to see the building, they come to consume the system within it. If he had tried to buy the buildings for every store, he would not have been able to expand at such a rapid pace. He saved the capital that would have been tied up in the shell and used it to increase the density of the core. This is the restaurant industry version of the Lakers-style deal structure. The pop-up store craze currently dominating trendy districts like Seongsu-dong or the Hyundai Seoul is the same. A pop-up store is, literally, the most extreme form of the tenant strategy. They borrow someone else's space for 2 weeks at most, or just a few days at the shortest. Even the interior is made temporarily with fake walls. They spend the absolute minimum on hardware. But what fills the inside? Limited edition goods, photo zones begging to be on Instagram, and an intense experience that only that brand can provide. Customers don't look at the flimsy fake walls. They go crazy for the content density inside. Companies are now focusing on creating powerful weights that last for 2 weeks, rather than building buildings that last for 100 years. This logic remains valid in individual career strategies. There is a common error committed by many professionals. It is the obsession with building their own architecture, creating a new job title or field. I will become a pioneer in a completely new field that no one else is doing. It sounds cool, but that can be as inefficient as Upstage trying to build a proprietary AI architecture from scratch. A successful career strategist does not deny the platform. They climb onto massive platforms where people are already gathered, like YouTube, LinkedIn, or the organizational system of a large corporation. And they thoroughly utilize the infrastructure provided by that system. Instead, within it, they create their own work skills, their weights that no one else can replace. Let me give you an example. Even among office workers who use Excel and PowerPoint the same way, some remain simple operators, while others use those tools to create structured reports that drive executive decision-making. Here, Excel is the standard architecture used by everyone. But the logic contained in that report is that person's unique weight. The company doesn't pay you for being good at using Excel. They pay you a higher salary for possessing those weights. Ultimately, what you need to ponder is not the hardware problem of, should I start my own company or not? It is, even if I am on someone else's company or platform, do I possess my own weights that make the system inoperable without me? Even if the landlord raises the rent or the platform's algorithm changes, the tenants who survive have one thing in common. They have food that cannot be tasted unless you go to that shop, or they solve problems that cannot be solved unless it is that person. That is the reason the Lakers were recognized as worth $10 billion, and the reason Upstage survived through the plagiarism allegations. Part 5. Scalable Application. Action Plan, Own versus Rent. Now it is time to draw a conclusion. The Lakers deal by Mark Walter and the AI architecture controversy of Upstage are not merely news thrown at you for passive observation. These are powerful signals telling you to restructure your own board immediately. No matter what industry you are in, verify your structure through the following 3 questions and put them into action. First, coldly distinguish between what you must own and what you must rent. The biggest mistake committed by many founders and planners is trying to build unnecessary infrastructure themselves out of pride. Thinking, I hate depending on others, so I won't use their stuff, is an amateur's romance. Ask yourself, is what I am trying to build right now my core competitiveness, or is it just basic infrastructure that everyone else already has? If it is infrastructure, boldly rent it. Rent the stadium like the Lakers, and rent the architecture like Upstage. Do not waste your limited capital and time making the shell. Do not become the person building the building. Become the person changing the air inside it. Second, define and record your own irreplaceable weights. Once you have rented the infrastructure, your remaining resources must be poured exclusively into increasing the density of your content. Just as Upstage proved their value through training logs, you must have a log that only you can show. If you are a marketer, simply knowing how to handle an ad manager tool is standard architecture. However, the correction log, the analysis of data from failed campaigns to raise the success rate even by 1%, that is your weight. This cannot be stolen, nor can it be cloned overnight. Keep in mind, the market assigns a value of $10 billion not to the person with a flashy shell, but to the person possessing this record of intense learning. Third, calculate the rent in advance and hedge the risks. If you have decided to ride on someone else's board, you must pay the price. The Lakers pay rent called NBA regulations, and YouTubers pay rent called algorithm changes. Do not feel aggrieved by this. This is the cost of business. Instead, do not stake your life on a single platform. Just as the Lakers diversify revenue sources through merchandise and sponsorships beyond broadcast rights, you must equip yourself with multi-compatibility to transplant your weights to various platforms. Even if the platform collapses, your content must survive and be able to move to another platform. That is true technological sovereignty. Part 6, closing. Content sovereignty. We no longer live in an era of building giant castles. We live in an era of nomads who freely cross between numerous castles, filling them with the most valuable stories. Mark Walter bought a team without a stadium, and Upstage created intelligence without a skeleton. They did not try to own the structure, they utilized it. Remember, structure is capital, but the content flowing through that structure is a power that overwhelms capital. Re-examine your board through the eyes of finance. We do not stand at the door, we design the door. Structure, Syndicate, eXpand. End.